Welcome back, everybody, to JOHS Literacy Bites, where every teacher can become a literacy teacher in 5 minutes or less. Today's topic, student self-grading. So this is it, everybody, the final literacy bite in our Right-On microlearning progression. Today, we're covering one of the most impactful cross-curricular strategies for student learning, facilitating self-grading sessions with your students. Thanks so much for your time and attention this semester. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to it. First, what do we mean when we talk about student self-grading? Self-grading is a process where students evaluate their own work using established criteria or rubrics, as seen in this very detailed illustration here. But more importantly, why should students self-grade their work? Self-grading promotes self-reflection, accountability, and deeper understanding. It helps students identify their strengths and areas for improvement, fostering a sense of ownership over their learning. You may be familiar with John Hattie's meta-analysis work, where he collected data from across the spectrum of available research to identify the effect sizes of dozens and dozens of distinct influences on student achievement. So aside from believing that your work actually matters and being qualified to do your work and being clear with students about expectations, student self-grading is the most impactful thing that you can do as a teacher to accelerate learning. And self-reflection is a crucial part of the learning process when you think about it in any context. If I'm learning how to ski, I'm not just going to go and keep going down the mountain full steam ahead without thinking about it, what happened on any of the previous runs, because obviously that would end in disaster. Instead, I'm going to think about what I did previously, acknowledge what I did well, and then make adjustments as necessary. So self-evaluation is a core part of the learning process, so it makes sense why a teacher would want to facilitate self-grading sessions with their students whenever appropriate. Before we go through the steps for self-grading, please take a second to respond to this discussion question with your peers. Have you ever facilitated a self-grading session with your students? And if so, what was your process like? Okay, so we can break down the student self-grading process into 5 steps. Introducing self-grading to students, teaching students how to use any rubrics and scoring criteria, practicing grading using anonymized student examples, implementing self-grading with students, and finally, facilitating reflection on the self-grading process. Let's look at the steps in more detail. First, introduce self-grading by explaining the purpose and outlining how the process will work in class, including which assignment or portion of an assignment students will be evaluating. We'll use this example from a Spanish class to show how it might work. Here, the teacher reminds students of the prompt from the assignment that they're going to be self-evaluating. In this case, it's a writing assignment asking students to write about their daily routine, including 5 different activities and using verbs in the present tense. The next step would be to teach students how to use any rubrics and scoring criteria associated with the assignment. The teacher here directs her students to look at the rubric and breaks the rubric down by criteria, major components of the assignment, and the language that differentiates the levels. In this case, she worked with her students to highlight each part of the rubric in a different color. Next, the teacher leads a practice session using anonymized examples of student work. You'll show examples at different proficiency levels, and you can do what this teacher here did and use AI to create examples if you have none available. You'll then point out different components of the rubric and the degree to which they're present in the student work. Here, the teacher calls students' attention to the verb conjugation in the first example. Finally, score the work together. Seek feedback from your students and try to reach consensus, but remember, as the content area expert in the room, you'll want to model the grading process at least to some extent. This would be a really good place for a think aloud to share your reasoning as you grade the different tiered examples. Next, implement self-grading with your students. Have students evaluate their own work using the rubric and ask them to refer back to the examples and notes from the whole class discussion of the models. Here are a few guiding questions that you can use as students self-grade. In which criteria is your work stronger than one or more of the examples? In which criteria does your work fall short of the examples? And which adjectives and descriptors in the rubric best describe certain aspects of your work and why? Hopefully, your students will be like this guy right here, but be prepared to circulate around the room to help students who are stuck and those who may grade their work a little bit too leniently or those who may grade it a little bit too harshly. Lastly, it's important to facilitate reflection on the self-grading process with your students. Encourage students to reflect on their self-grading experience to solidify connections between their efforts on the assignment and their outcomes. And feel free to use the questions here or make your own to accommodate the individual needs of your assignments. Notice how these reflection questions ask students to consider how they prepared for the assignment, their strengths and weaknesses, future applications, their time management, and how what they learned relates to relevant skills and future work habits. And that's it. Thanks, everybody. As a bridge to practice, consider your class's upcoming assignments at the end of quarter 2 or beginning of quarter 3. Which of these assignments would be suitable for students to practice self-grading?